Welcome to XYPN Radio, where your host Alan Moore brings you into a community of fee-only financial planners who want to profitably and successfully serve Gen X and Gen Y clients. If you're ready to get the knowledge you need from leaders in your field, learn from forward-thinking advisors, and take action on your own goals, XYPN Radio is the show for you. Here's your host.
Hello, and welcome to this episode of XYPN Radio. I'm Maddie Roach, your host for today's podcast. Alan Moore is enjoying his sabbatical. I'm excited to have XYPN member David Shotwell, owner of Shotwell Rutter Baer, a fee-only firm in Lansing, Michigan, on the show today. David started his career over 20 years ago in the brokerage world, but as David says, he feels like he's just getting started. David is a great example of a successful succession plan. 13 years ago, he was tapped by a former contact named Beth to join her firm. Although Beth wasn't ready to retire, she was ready to have someone join her team as a succession plan. And in 2018, the succession plan was finalized. Now, with 4 full-time teammates, over $750,000 in revenue, and over 150 clients, David is running a growing firm. He's implementing new technology to streamline the business. He's adding in touches of George Kinder's life planning techniques, and he's finally settling in on a niche. David is also humble enough to know he's never done learning. He's recently enrolled in a master's program and utilizes XYPN's executive business coach, Arlene Moss, as his accountability partner. We discuss how implementing the EOS model from the book Traction has helped him and his team orient around the 10-year vision for the firm. David recently engaged an outsourced IT consultant and discusses how, with a firm his size, this is the kind of security that his high net worth clients were looking for. Although David has over 20 years under his belt, he's a great example of how in this industry, you never do stop learning. If you're considering joining a team in hopes for a successful succession plan or just want to know what it's like to service over 100 clients, then this episode is for you.
XY Planning Network's annual benchmarking survey is out. Are you curious about the average number of clients XYPN members get in their first year, or how successful niches really are? To answer these burning questions and more, we've again enlisted a professional research firm to complete our annual benchmarking study. Get your copy hot off the press and discover vital statistics such as the median advisor revenue by years in practice and sources of firm growth, from referrals to blogging, social media, and more. Head over to xyplanningnetwork.com/study to purchase your copy today.
You can find any of the resources we mentioned during the episode at xyplanningnetwork.com/234. Also, be sure to go to xyplanningnetwork.com/VIP to join our private group just for XYPN radio listeners. It's the community of advisors we've all been looking for that's there to provide support when we need it the most. Best of all, it's free. I encourage you to check it out. Again, that's xyplanningnetwork.com/VIP. Without further ado, here's my interview with David Shotwell. Hey, David, welcome to XYPN Radio. How are you doing?
I'm doing great, Maddie. It's good to be here.
It's great to have you. David, I've been so looking forward to this interview. David has been with XYPN for over 2 years, which is about the length of time we start considering members, veteran members. And David's played a real pivotal role here at XYPN, which we'll get into further into the conversation. But to start us off, David, why don't you introduce yourself to the listeners?
Sure. I'm Dave Shotwell. I'm the owner of Shotwell Rutter Baer, a independent RIA here in Michigan. Started in the industry 20 years ago, back year 2000. So not quite 20 years. I've got 2 months before I can really say that. But it doesn't seem that long. It seems like I'm still just starting, which I guess is a good thing. I started in the investment world, in more of the old traditional brokerage type route. Started right after the NASDAQ peaked. Like I got my Series 7 license within a month of the NASDAQ peaking from the tech bubble. So for the first basically 3 years of my career, hardly anybody made any money, but nothing was my fault. And I've got clients now that I got back then, that first came to me back then. So I guess longevity has its rewards.
Absolutely. And I want to ask you why you feel like you're just getting started. But if we need to reserve that conversation for later, we can. But if you have any thoughts, I'd love that.
I think it's part of the nature of being a business owner and being an entrepreneur. It's like you're always like, yeah, as soon as I get this thing done or implement that process or bring in this piece of software or hire that person, everything's gonna change and it's just gonna be smooth sailing. And then there's always that next thing beyond that. I think that's it. And for a long time that bugged me. But I think I just look at that as part of what goes with being a business owner, and especially in this industry that's always changing. So that's what I meant by that.
Definitely. I think one of the themes of XYPN Radio is kind of highlighting how frequently members have to continue to iterate on their practices and always be thinking strategically about the next 5, 10, even 20 years. So let's rewind a little bit. And why don't you expand a bit on, post-college and just getting into this industry? What was it like then? And where did you see yourself going long term? Because it probably wasn't the RIA path.
No. In fact, I took economics in college, but no finance. I was a history major and a political science major and had no inkling that this would be my career at the time. And when I got out of college, I actually was, when I went into this business, I'd actually been teaching for a community college. I was teaching literature and writing, freshman writing to community college folks. And a friend of mine who worked for one of the local banks in their trust department grabbed me and said, "Hey, you're wasting your time. Come work with me." And at first I was like, no, it's just not me at all. And I just never saw myself in anything more than maybe a teaching kind of role. And it just kind of was something I was going to try while I bridged some gaps. Next thing I know, 20 years later, here we are. So
Wow. And what drew you to it? And was there something of interest that you wanted to expand past the teaching that you thought you could get into in the banking world?
Well, we were actually like wirehouse brokers attached to the trust department. So it was like a brokerage role right from the start. Like I said, it really wasn't something I was looking for. It was more out of I was struggling to find that career path. So this was something that, a good friend was good enough to say, "Hey, you'd be good at this role. Come do this with me." And at first I was very reluctant. And then I thought, well, I'll just try it because I don't really have a lot of other long-term career options right now, unless I go back to school or, something along those lines. And I think what I figured out, Maddie, is after a little while, it really was kind of a teaching role. And it was a way for me to be that geek I'd always wanted to be, with actually a subject matter that was really interesting and fascinating. And so there was always that connection, because really, if you think about what we do most of the time, it's teaching, one-on-one with different people every day, but that's what we get to do. So it did connect. It just took a while for me to see it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I just had Lori DeFore on the podcast just a couple of weeks ago, and she's still in a teaching position while she runs her business. And I think we've really seen that in terms of career changers. There are some careers that kind of lend themselves a bit more to this industry than others. So how long did you spend in the brokerage world, and how long before that was the transition to the RIA?
Yeah. So I was with that initial role till 2006. And then I went to a small community bank in their investment department. I pretty much was the investment department with a small broker dealer that just worked with community banks. And I was there until 2013. And I had gotten my CFP at that point and knew I wanted to find a way into the fee only world. And as luck would have it, in fall of 2012, I was sitting at the airport, Detroit Metro, flying out to the FPA National Conference, and I ran into a woman whom I'd known because we had a mutual client maybe 10 years prior. And I just sat down and started talking to her, and she had started the firm that she owned in 2000, about the same time I had started in the investment world. And it started it at her kitchen table. And she said, I'm not looking to retire anytime soon, but I probably should look to bring in somebody. So if you're interested in getting out of the BD world, come see me. And we got back from Seattle and we had coffee. And 3 months later, I was writing my resignation letter and transferring clients to her RIA. So.
Wow. Well, networking has paid off for you in a number of different ways. It seems like people are attracted to you and what you can offer. And I love this because you are an example of what is often an example of a failed succession plan. You're actually an example of a successful succession plan. So
Right.
talk us through kind of how did that initial conversation go with your colleague, and what did you bring to the table in terms of non-negotiables, in terms of, how transparent were you about where you wanted to go and how you wanted to do it, and or was it very much just a one-sided conversation? Here's what you could get here.
No, it was very much just a broad conversation to start with about how we might be able to work together. She had a fee-only business and was custodying it at SEI. And I was in kind of a unique situation because I was working for this little community bank, and 90% of my business was fee-based business and, very little of the brokerage world, which lends itself well to that transition. But the problem I had was I was splitting time between Northern Michigan, where that community bank was, and Southern Michigan, where my wife had changed jobs. And on top of that, maybe half of my really, really good clients at that bank were also members of the bank's board of directors or somehow tied to that institution. So it was a real shrug as far as like, okay, how much of my book can move, how much of it can't move. So it kind of put me in a little bit of a unique position. Beth was adamant we were not going to do anything that violated any non-solicitation agreements or anything. I really think what made it work between us, where I see other folks struggle with that sort of succession planning, is that I think, first of all, her starting the conversation with, I do not intend to retire anytime soon. So don't get any big ideas. This is about merging. I've had clients ask me what happens if something happens to you. And that's why I really want to bring someone in. We can talk about the other stuff later. At the time she was in her late 60s. So it was kind of implied that at some point she would retire, but we came at it from the standpoint of we're merging two businesses to support each other, and the other stuff will just kind of take care of itself. And I think that gave us both kind of an equal footing to establish that relationship rather than just coming in and saying, okay, here's what I think my business is worth, and I want you to, come in and take over, or me saying it's time for you to, pack up and move on. So I'm willing to pay you X for your clients. It was more, how can we be partners and move this on for all of our benefit? So maybe that's not as unique as I think it is, but when I talk to other people, it seems like they get hung up in trying to maximize things for themselves or feel the other person is trying to maximize things for themselves, and that there's not a lot of empathy going on. So,
yeah. What was the employment engagement like? Were you just a salaried employee starting on a certain date, and how did you negotiate that?
So what we did to start off with was, the things they tell you not to do when you do succession planning, like we basically did revenue sharing. I was a 1099 employee, and we agreed that we would do that for the first 2 years. Then we would talk about partnership. And so, we worked out a split that was equitable as far as the revenue sharing went. And then after 2 years of that, moved into an ownership role based on the amount of revenue that I had brought with me. So, again, she bent over backwards to be fair about how we did the initial combining of the firm. It was much more of a merger. And then, so that was 2015 that I became a partner. And then in 2018, she eventually did retire. She still comes in and audits the billing for us.
Wow.
And, she keeps in touch with a few select clients, but she is a very detail-oriented person. I am not a detail-oriented person. And she actually enjoys coming in once a quarter when the fees from our custodians come in, and making sure that all the right, households were set up correctly and everybody got the discounts they were supposed to get. And she has a spreadsheet, the system, and she's good at it. And I will pay her for that as long as she wants to do it. And I think she likes it because then it's her chance to say, oh, Bob and Joan Smith, how are they doing? I haven't talked to them in a while, because you'll see all those names on the client list. So it's been pretty cool.
Yeah. She's still doing quality control. I love it. Her name is still attached to the firm.
And we need it. It is. Yep. So
awesome. And then we do have a lot of members talking about the potential of partnering up. And in fact, in a few weeks, we will have a few different members who partnered up join us on this radio show. But I'm wondering, did you do any specific work to make sure that Beth was a partner that you were comfortable engaging with and that your personalities matched? I know Kitsis has written a bunch on how to make sure partnerships are sustainable. What kind of intention did you have with that?
It's funny. I learned a lot of the things I should have done after the fact and could kind of sit back and go, boy, did I get lucky. So I can't claim any, it was more like I said, I had actually known Beth since 2003. We just hadn't had a lot of interaction for a few years. We had actually, if you can imagine some punk kid in the brokerage world given a seat at the table in a meeting with a fairly high net worth family and their CFP. And she wasn't going to take any garbage from me, but she definitely didn't make me feel like I didn't belong either. So I kind of knew, like going back through all that history, that we probably weren't going to have any major compatibility issues. She's also just totally transparent. Like you never have to question where you stand with Beth because she's just going to tell you. So to answer your question, I didn't do nearly as much as I should have done. I think we just both knew right from the first couple of discussions that we really wanted to make it work and trusted each other enough to make sure it happened. And I kind of do think, most of these things in life, we make a decision based on our gut, and then everything else, all the analytics we do is basically just justifying that decision. So that's probably all it would have been anyway. So
I hear that. So you became partner in 2015. Beth retires in 2018. Walk the listeners through kind of when you started at the firm to now, kind of what the difference is. You have a number of different employees. Maybe the firm has grown substantially. I guess tell us what's the difference between then and now.
It's really quite different in a lot of ways. So I should have printed out a copy of our mission statement for you. Because one of the things Beth always was proud of is that, she would say, I want the kitchen table approach. It's always going to be me and my clients around the kitchen table, because that's how she literally started the firm, around her kitchen table. And so when I started working with her, I had to kind of work up the courage to say, Beth, I really need to get some financial planning software. I need to do, because she had always just she did a great job, but it was very old school, yellow notepad, it had very low overhead too. So it was like incrementally kind of building the technology stack on what the custodian had already provided, but building out that looks entirely different now, where I think we've got a pretty good system and technology in place, but that was kind of a building process. And, she was a little reluctant with some of it, but she never was going to say no. It was always, we need to make sure this is right for the future and right for you guys. So our mission statement, I'm going to paraphrase because I don't have it memorized, but it says we're still proud. We want to keep our kitchen table roots and at the same time provide state-of-the-art financial planning, but keep in touch with those kitchen table roots that we were founded on. So our clients still get that personal, it's just us sitting around talking, but in the background, we're doing all the heavy lifting. That's kind of the gist of it. I should have it memorized probably, right?
I won't ask you to repeat it, but I love this idea that you do have a mission statement for your firm. And I don't think that that's something every advisor has, but I would highly recommend it, because what a great way to orient yourself and kind of reiterate your commitments that you're making on a daily basis to yourself and to your clients and to the quality of the delivery of service. How do you use the mission statement? Is that something you kind of print out and laminate and slip across the kitchen table?
Yeah, we have 3 different office spaces right now. And we actually have a 2 foot by 3 foot copy of it
Wow.
in a frame in every office, signed by all 5 of us.
I love that.
So, yeah.
And so your clients can see that mission statement and how all staff members are bought into it when they visit your offices.
Yep. And when we do financial plans, I have a little template that I use, and the mission statement is actually one of the pages in the template. So clients always have a copy with their stuff too.
Is that something that you instated, or was that a mission statement that had been passed along from Beth? It sounds like it incorporated some of Beth.
Yeah, we did that. I want to say it was 2015 because Jeff had already joined us. So it was somewhere right around 2015, maybe early 2016. And I really don't remember. It wasn't like we woke up one morning and said we need a mission statement. That something must have kicked that off for us, but we sat down and did it. I should have thought about that. I don't remember the origin story of the mission statement.
Yeah, I think mission statements are so important on so many fronts, whether it's a personal mission statement or a personal leadership philosophy, something along those lines. But even at XYPN in the department level, we each as directors make up our own mission statements and vision statements because in fact, they're 2 different things, that they really are a great reminder to all employees about what we're committed to and how that influences our day-to-day work. Talk to us about who makes up the firm today. You mentioned Jeff. Beth is retired.
Yep. So Jeff joined us in 2015, and he has done the classwork for the CFP, but he has not taken the exam yet. But his natural talents are more the detail-oriented chief operations type role, and he actually really embraces that. He does have some client-facing duties and a few clients assigned to him, but he's the day-to-day, figure out the facilities, figure out, all the little details, make sure all the meetings are ready to go, that sort of stuff. And so he joined us in 2015. Shortly after he joined us, we realized that we needed some more admin help. And actually, when I think about it, so Beth had a part-time admin person that was there when I joined her, and Carol was retiring. So we knew we needed some more admin help. And we reached out to a woman who had first worked with me in 2003 at that first bank job. She joined us there. And then when I left there, she had stayed, but then she joined me at the other bank in between and worked with me there for a few years. So Amy Gowden and I go back, 16 years now in one form or another.
Wow.
And before she worked with us at National City, she had been in the Traverse City office of one of the big wirehouses as a lead admin person. So the bottom line is she knows how to get just about anything done with a custodian. And my longtime clients know her as well as they know me. So she joined us. She joined us then. And for a long time, she worked remotely because I had moved away from the town where she's located. But now I'm back up north. I'm there today. So we have a small office here where she can be.
Awesome.
So, yeah. And then Nick Nada joined us in February. So he's coming up on his 1-year anniversary with us. At the same time, I'll have my 20 in the industry. Nick has been, I want to say this will be his 13th year in the industry, and he's a CFP. He came from the credit union world, very similar to my background in that he was trying to do real financial planning in the bank broker dealer world. He is very good at, his connection is with the life planning stuff where I came out of a very investment oriented portfolio management kind of background. He's more of the life planning philosophical component, and he's actually brought me a long way in a year as far as implementing some of that. We both did the Kinder Pre-Con at XYPN Live this year. We're hoping to get him to the full Kinder event here at some point this year, but helping us bring that component in.
Awesome. And if you wouldn't mind expanding a bit on the Kinder experience, I know a lot of our members recently have gotten very interested in life planning and incorporating that into their firms. I
Mhm.
guess talk to us about what were the takeaways and what did you implement after going to that pre-con?
So we had already started to bring in some of those elements, just not in as formal. One of the first things we did when Nick joined us is we sat down and said, okay, this is our financial planning process, which was good, but left room for improvement. And what we did is we ended up taking our framework and expanding it. Nick had, at that point, not done the Kinder program, but had read George's books. But he'd also been through the Money Quotient program,
Mhm.
which has a lot of those elements. So we brought in a lot of that, helping clients develop a vision, connecting them to their money more or less. So, okay, my key takeaways from Kinder is, I'm culturally by upbringing Swedish Lutheran, and I talked about my feelings more in 2 days than I had in 25 some years probably. And I came out of it completely exhausted, but I thought it was fantastic. And it was like I just sat there thinking back through clients that I've worked with over the years that was what they needed, you know,
Mm.
and how either we could have helped them better, or if they were clients that are still working with us, it's like, okay, how do we subtly bring in this now that we've got this established relationship, but this is what they need. And, from the business owner's standpoint, we can talk about the automation of the investment world and the commoditization of a lot of what we do, and it's very true. Nobody's ever going to automate or distill life planning the way that George Kinder teaches it down to an algorithm, So the better we can get at that sort of thing, the more viable our business is for the future. And while it pushes me past a comfort zone, that's not necessarily a bad thing too. Nick takes to it pretty naturally, so that helps. He's planning to do the Kinder program. I actually just signed up for Kansas State's master's program.
Wow.
I don't think I
Congrats.
told, yeah. And that has a large behavioral finance and coaching element to it too. So I'm looking forward to that.
Absolutely. So expand on that you just pursued a master's program this deep into your career already.
So, I didn't dive into my own backstory too deep, but, I had always intended to go to graduate school, not for financial planning, but that was the career path. I had imagined more of an academic career path for myself coming out of college, and life got in the way. And here we are 20 some years later, right?
Mm.
So part of it is just me wanting to go back and kind of fill that part of my ego that's missing. But
Mm.
then part of it, we never do anything for just one reason, right?
Mhm.
I do feel that, you've got to keep learning and challenging yourself in this industry. I don't think my clients are going to care.
Mm.
Or prospects. I don't see it as being a big deal in that respect. But I think it's important, if we're going to continue creating a profession here, the more academic approaches we can create to what we do, the stronger that will be. And it's just always been had an appeal to me. I'd also say too that, we work a lot with Michigan State and University of Michigan faculty, and we're trying to build those connections to that program at Michigan State, which is fairly new. It's right in our backyard. So we're
Mm.
hoping to have those connections. And I can see myself going back to that teaching role that I started with so many years ago at some point in my future. So it seemed like the smart thing to do.
Yeah.
It seemed like the time to do it.
Yeah, it seems like a really nice way to kind of have your previous life integrate into your current life when
Mm-hmm.
it comes to the day-to-day of servicing the firm. So it does also sound like with the implementation of technology and getting to become a bit more streamlined in that regard, and now the addition of kind of a life planning component, it sounds like the experience of the client might have evolved over these years. Do you want to speak to that a bit?
Well, yes. I've been using Money Guide Pro since 2006, so through several major updates, and still not quite where it should be. But none of them are. There's always, it's funny how things move so fast that now we complain about the things that we never dreamed we'd be able to do at all a few years ago. Like, what do you mean I've got to enter the symbols manually because this won't integrate with that? It's the promise is huge for what it means for the end client. I don't know that the client notice. I kind of feel like if we're doing it right, the client doesn't really notice the technology. We still are meeting with them one-on-one to solve problems. I think we just have a lot better understanding and a lot more analytical underpinning to what we do now. I don't know.
Great.
Does that make sense?
It sure does. Yeah, it sure does. And a lot of the techs, I mean, to your point, a lot of the technology that XYPN offers in our tech stack and the technology advisors even just use on the day-to-day really aren't client-facing all the time. A lot of it is just how to keep ourselves organized.
Right. Yeah, I need to go back and use software to do the analysis, but the client doesn't need to see a 10-page report for me to tell them whether they should do a Roth conversion and how much. That's more for me.
Right. Totally. So let's switch gears a bit. I know that you have just implemented the entrepreneurial operating system, the EOS model that Alan has talked a lot about on this podcast already. But since we have a real live member who has implemented that in their business, would you mind expanding about kind of what it is, how you found it, and why you've implemented it?
So, yeah, I would say we're implementing, not that we've implemented. We're getting there. This is our second quarter using it, and I think we're starting to hit our stride. So I first found out about it I was actually at XYPN Pause this spring, and coming out of that, I was talking with Katie Cole from Texas, and she said, well, if you're looking for a way to bring all the things we've talked about at Pause together, you should read this book. And I downloaded it on my Kindle as I was leaving and read it on the plane on the way home, Traction by Gino Wickman. So that was kind of my intro to it. And it was kind of like, we had just done all this really cool model building and seeing how different variables affected our business growth at XYPN Pause. But Traction really gave me like a way to come back to my team and say, okay, these are the projects we need to do over the next, so many months. And here's an accountability system really to make sure we all know what our role is. We all know what our jobs are and how we're going to get from point A to point B.
Love it. We at XYPN have implemented it as well. And I really have told Alan a number of times that I felt like 2 years ago when we implemented the EOS model, that it really changed how we ran XYPN for the better. It really gives you a rhythm to running your business. And do you follow that? Have you set kind of your 10-year target, and do you follow the L10 principles of a meeting?
Yeah. So what I did with the L10 principles of the meetings, I took the agendas so we were already having a weekly team meeting. So I basically took our agenda template because we had a pretty good one. Part of it was interesting to me that some of the stuff we were already doing, it just wasn't tied together the way it should be. So I took our weekly team meeting and revised the agenda to include some of the Traction principles. I didn't have to change a lot there. We had already had a quarterly team meeting that we had started right before Traction, and that was when we redid our planning process. That right after Nick joined us. So what we did here, basically we did the 10-year vision and then the 3-year vision and 1-year vision just in October at our quarterly meeting then. Yeah. So it's all still, like I said, we're implementing. We haven't implemented.
Sure.
We're getting there. But part of that was we went through and scheduled all of our quarterly meetings on just a set. Basically, we're doing them the third Monday of the new quarter, every quarter going forward. Because by then we'll know our revenue. We get paid in arrears from most of our asset management work. So usually that stuff comes in the middle of that month after the quarter end. So if we have our team quarterly meeting at the end of that month after the quarter starts, we'll know our numbers and we'll know how the financial picture looks for the next 3 months. So we're kind of staggered as far as our goals go. It's not the calendar quarter end. Our quarter end is like 3 weeks later.
Yeah.
But that's worked well. What I've been doing, Maddie, is as I've been trying to figure out traction, I go to Arlene Moss. It's funny because she'll say, just a minute, I'll go back and look at what we did on that and how we handled it. So you guys are a little bit ahead of us, but it's been fun kind of bouncing that around.
Oh, I love that. And I do want to ask you about your relationship with Arlene Moss, our executive business coach. But going back to traction, what we've found to be so helpful is the scorecard and recognizing that there should be, 8 to 10 KPIs that any advisor or business owner needs to know if they were on an abandoned island by themselves, what would be the stats they need to know that their business is still afloat. Would you mind sharing some of those stats? Maybe not what they actually are, but what you're tracking on the day-to-day?
Yeah. So I'm going to preface this by saying in the past, I was always one of those guys who would say, I don't really care, like setting a goal of saying, I want to grow X% over the next 12 months, or I want to have so much assets under management by this date never meant much to me. It's always been, I've always looked at it as if I can figure out what the activities I need to do are, the numbers will take care of themselves. So some of that part was actually kind of a struggle for me. What we did, so you're asking me, I should have looked at this stuff before we get on the phone, but we came up with a spreadsheet that Jeff helps me put the numbers in for each quarter that shows new clients, total revenue from new clients. So we can kind of separate out what's market movement from, actual growth in acquiring assets, and looking at the numbers of prospects that have come in and what the sources were for those, and how many of them are converting into clients and how many of them are converting into asset management or subscription planning engagement clients. That's the basic gist of it. I also look at the profit numbers myself, but I don't worry the team too much for that stuff.
Yeah, awesome. And would you be willing to share, and maybe you don't know it verbatim, but what is your 10-year vision for your company?
So our 10-year vision, I should preface this by saying we are just getting started with marketing to a niche, being Michigan State faculty and staff. We already have several as clients, so it's more just kind of focused marketing efforts. And we also have a lot of University of Michigan faculty and staff too, which is very similar plans, and then a lot of state of Michigan employees. But the role with where we see ourselves in 10 years is we kind of started talking about, like, okay, if we're going to do this marketing, what would be success? And we came up with our first go at it. We were like, well, we want 10% of the Michigan State faculty and staff at the end of 10 years. Wow. But at the time, at our first go at that, we had no context for what that meant. So we went back and looked at how much, that would be just an absurd number of clients. We actually cut that in half to 5. Okay. And then we looked at it, and, I wish I'd put this stuff at my fingertips before we started, but we essentially then went through and said, okay, I think whatever percentage we came up with, it worked out to like 600 new clients. The original one was 1,200. And we looked at it and said, okay, that would be 600 new households on top of the 150 or so that we have right now. What would we need to service those? And kind of worked into how many advisors that would mean, and then how much we would need for support staff and what were we comfortable with. And I think it came down to 2 or 3 new advisors and 2 or 3 support staff. And one of the things kind of that we've decided we want to try to implement is a residency program. And so that was, how would we, that was part of the 10-year plan, was assuming we'd have that up and running and that there'd be resident support staff kind of playing a paraplanner role, more or less, or an advanced paraplanner role with those advisors. So we kind of boiled it down to what that we actually have an org chart that is color coded to show what we have now, what it would look like in 3 years, and what it would look like in 10 years.
Yes.
So the 3-year iteration, which is also part of traction, then by the end of 3 years, we need to have that residency program fleshed out and actually have that implemented and probably have at least one new advisor on at that point.
I love that. You sound so intentional with this. And that's what I love about Traction so much in the OS model is that it really helps you orient yourself to where you want to be, because
Yes.
otherwise you're just going to be scrambling around realizing you've hired too late. So
Right.
you can just hear it in your voice about your understanding of where you're going.
And so the 1 year version is that we're going to try to get an internship program up and running for this coming summer, with the idea that that would expand into a residency program, hopefully the next year. And then as far as bringing on another advisor goes, we're kind of looking at that as something we might have to be opportunistic about. So rather than, a particular time frame, we're not marketing it right now, but we're also looking at our networks and talking to a few potential, like, let us know if you know someone that fits this kind of situation. Just kind of informally looking around right now.
Absolutely. The last thing you want is to be scrambling to hire somebody and not know
Right.
at all where they're going to come from. And to be able to facilitate professional development early on through the internship program and the residency program could really do big favors for you long term. That's incredible.
Right.
Anytime members are in the triple digits of clients, I always like to talk to them about how they organize the client relationships and whether you have assigned staff members working exclusively with those relationships, or do you do it more as a team dynamic with those individuals? Do you service your clients as a team, or is there, Jeff gets client 1 through 100 and you get the others, or how do you parse it up?
So traditionally, it's been, Beth had her clients, I had my clients, we shared some clients. And when Nick came on last spring, he brought his clients with him. With new prospects, we've been trying to take a more team approach where I've been doing certain functions with the new prospects and he's been doing certain functions. We still haven't quite nailed that, but I think we all agree our aspiration is that clients will be clients of the firm rather than a particular advisor. And I think we're getting there. As far as support goes, every one of my clients knows Amy and knows Jeff and knows that they're probably going to have a better chance of getting them on the phone than they're going to get me. So, that's something we've instilled in them, is that they need to be comfortable talking to any of us. So, and that lets Jeff and Amy kind of filter out some things for me that don't necessarily need to come all the way up the line. I love my clients. I love to talk to my clients, but sometimes it's better if they just need a distribution or something administrative that I find out about it while it's in process instead of having to jump in.
I totally relate to that. In terms of the member experience program at XYPN, we built that out 2 years ago. And for the first time, 3 years into my career at XYPN, I was telling members that there was a different staff member who might also be able to answer their questions. And that really got me thinking as we built this team out. And now we're seeing MESs get promotions and advance out of the positions that, the one-to-one relationship is as incredible as it is. It can actually be leveraged to be a team relationship. And that can actually enhance the experience of the member, and in your case, the client, by having multiple eyes on the relationship. And CRMs are magical things. You really can take great detailed notes about clients and be able to pick up the conversation.
Right.
How has that been from the client's perspective? Have they enjoyed working, with other people outside of just you?
And none of our clients have had a problem with that at all. And, every once in a while in prospect meetings or when somebody's ready to become a client, they'll ask, now I'm going to have you, right? And so we kind of try to get in front of that and say, I'm always going to have a role I'll always have a role in their case. It doesn't matter, where we go, but it doesn't mean that they're always going to be talking to me about every little thing. And quite frankly, if somebody's not going to understand that, then it's probably not going to be a great relationship anyway.
Right. And it does allow for your staff to specialize as well. And really, as you kind of described, have functioning ownership over certain aspects of the relationship.
Yes.
So tell me about the relationship that you've had with Arlene Moss, our executive business coach. You've been probably one of her longer clients since we've rolled this out. You've worked with her probably over a year now, haven't you?
Yeah, I want to say it's probably 18 months at this point.
Wow.
I'd have to go back and
Wow.
look. Yeah. Not, terribly long, but long enough that I think we know each other pretty well. The big thing Arlene does, and it's kind of funny because so she does an intro call, an onboarding call, and she said after we talked, I must sound more organized and more on top of things than I am. She said, I don't think you need me for accountability. And I was like, no, that is exactly what I need. I need somebody to tell me that my ideas aren't crazy and to make sure I follow through on them. And so that's in a nutshell. Not that, it's somebody that has seen a little bit of everything out there who I can bounce ideas off of and say, hey, we're looking at, starting a residency program, and this is kind of how I see it in my head. Is that silly? What am I missing? And, usually the answer is somewhere along the lines of, you're not crazy, but you need to make sure you consider these two aspects, because I've seen other people struggle with that. There's usually something in there in any of those things that I wouldn't have thought of on my own without trial and error. So, just having somebody with more outside experience and lots of different irons in the fire to know what works and what doesn't is helpful. So, and she's a pretty good motivator. So
She is. She is a very, very, very good cheerleader. She's a self-proclaimed cheerleader. And I've been lucky enough to work with her for a number of years. But for the listeners who don't know, Arlene Moss is the executive business coach at XYPN, and some of our advanced members engage her for a monthly relationship that, to what David's point was, which is she holds them accountable, and she really very much is a coach, and that is a specialty. The executive business coach is a role that takes a massive amount of experience to master, and Arlene has had at least a decade under her belt of working exclusively with state registered or SEC registered RIAs. So the kind of understanding that she has for our member firms is really unique in that she's been around and has seen some grow, some fail, some do other things. What would you say has been, I guess, give listeners an example of something that you've worked through with her over the past 18 months where you felt like you probably wouldn't have done that without Arlene's support?
she gave me, really, really good advice when we were looking to revamp our marketing and our website, and just helping me establish the timeline. That's one of those things that it's very easy for somebody like me to have these ideas and then fall back to, oh, I'm busy with clients and I just need to focus on what's in front of me, and rather than do the hard work of hiring a web designer and getting that kind of stuff done. So she's been very helpful with that as we've gone through that over the last year. She was also very helpful when I was trying to sort out how do I bring Nick on board and make sure that we get him, the support he needs, and put him in a good place to get launched with us, because she's seen how that works and has good ideas there. So you wanted something specific, and I'm struggling for that, but it's been a lot of little things. I throw a lot at her. I think every time we do a call, I'm like, oh, here's something completely different we haven't talked about that I need your input on. So that's really kind of the nature of it. And then, I get an email from her saying, these are the things you told me you were going to do before our next call. So I expect them to be done. And I get about half of them done. And she, every once in a while she's like, you're just really not ever going to get that done, and we can move on. And some of them she says, you really need to do that. So let's do it.
I love that. So many of our advanced advisors, and advanced in terms of just veterans in the industry, having run their firms for at least a decade or so, really do struggle with accountability. And I think implementing things like the EOS model and saying that you are not done learning is one of the most important things you can do as a business owner, and say, you know what, I'm going to engage in the,
Right.
whether it be a career coach or a business coach like Arlene, to be able to have another advocate on your side. It's like seeking out financial planning. You don't know how good it can be until you do get that expert in your corner.
Right. And just to know, it's kind of an interesting change of jobs to go from being a practicing financial planner to running a firm. And, we see this with clients who are small business owners, and it's the heart and soul of Michael Gerber's stuff, that just people tend to get entrepreneurial bugs about what they do and don't realize it's a whole different skill set. And so I really enjoy that aspect of what I do now, but it's definitely outside my experience. So it's good to have that seasoned voice of reason.
Of reason. I love that.
Grounding. Yeah. Yeah.
I asked this on the last podcast and I loved the answer to it. But what keeps you up at night? I mean, as you think about your 10-year vision for the company, what's the biggest thing that has you worried?
I'm going to say two things. One is like the more immediate, like realistic kind of stuff. Like when I think about what could undo our business, it's not like the markets don't bother me too much. Like I said, started at the start of the tech crash and survived the financial crisis and probably survive things like that again at some point here, hopefully later than sooner. It's like cybersecurity. That was a big thing for me over the last few months. And we've actually hired an IT firm to support us in that. And so I feel much better about it now than I did a month ago. Mm-hmm. But it's things like that. The things about our business that we just don't know and can't, like, what's the thing we haven't thought of that could undo us? I don't worry about robo-advisors. I don't worry about Schwab buying TD Ameritrade. I mean, I do. It's going to be annoying, but it's, it's not going to end us. The things that keep me up at night are just those, like, what could we screw up that we haven't thought of that could just really ruin our reputation, or, those are the things I kind of worry about. So hiring an IT firm actually was a big step in that direction. The other thing, you said, like, what are the next 10 years are going to bring? The thing that keeps me up at night is it's been 20 years and I feel like I just blinked my eye. And so, is 10 years enough to get where I want to go, to build what we want to build and get it where we want it to be? I guess I will call it my version of a midlife crisis, I guess. That all of a sudden, at 47 years old, I'm sitting here going, oh my gosh, I've been doing this for 20 years and it feels like 6. And when I make a 10-year plan, what am I going to do, to make sure that all happens in this 10 years enough? And it is, and I need to relax. But you asked, so there's the answer.
Oh, I love that. I think that's a really honest answer. And, you're putting a lot of things in place that are going to see that 10-year vision through, and just knowing what that vision is will help you hopefully sleep better at night. But right. I do want to go back to the cybersecurity a bit. What are you having that IT company do for you in terms of cybersecurity protection?
So they're doing a whole bunch of stuff, not to put it lightly, but they're basically, they took over all of our virus protection, VPN. They actually did physical inspections of our offices and upgraded the networks.
Wow.
And so there's a whole layer of security there that we didn't have before. They do a quarterly security meeting with us. We just had our first one on Friday, and we've only been with them a few months, so it wasn't real robust at this point, but it kind of was like, here's what this is going to look like in the future. Mm-hmm. They actually run like fake phishing scams with us as employees. We'll get and then report back to us on the outcomes. So there's a whole robust infrastructure to it. They instituted password managers for us and 2-factor authentication. And there's probably a whole bunch of the younger generation of XYPN folks rolling their eyes and saying, you're paying somebody to do that for you. But, it's a load off my mind just to know that that's all being done right.
Absolutely.
And other things that they're doing for us. So they basically have an inventory of all of our IT now, right? Every laptop that we have and every system. Mm-hmm. Part of the meeting on Friday, they went through it and said, okay, this, Amy's laptop will be 4.5 years old next summer. And that's about the life cycle of that. So you need to budget, $1,800 for a new laptop for her. And it was just kind of funny because it's kind of that proactive thing that we do for clients, but it's in a whole, like a dedicated subject matter where I've got no expertise.
Right.
And they're they say one of your printers kind of stinks, but just kind of keep in your head, you're going to need $500 for a new printer at some point when that croaks,
Wow.
So it's from a business owner standpoint that I thought was pretty cool. Instead of just trying to, wing it with IT budgets, I actually have a map of what we might need when. And then we want to set up the conference room with really good virtual meeting technology at the Lansing office. And so they're going to, work up a budget and come back to me and say, these are the things you need to make it work the way you want it to work. And so it's saving, it's an expense, but it's also saving. Like before I would have said to Jeff, hey, see if you can figure out what we need to make a first-rate conference room there. And he would have had to, jump online and do a bunch of research, and we never would have known if we got it right.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm pretty excited about that. The other thing is we all have buttons on our laptops now that we can press. It's like the easy button,
Wow.
If you're having any kind of technological problem, you click that button and they get a full diagnostic report from our computer and can jump right in and do remote access and fix things. So
what a valuable investment.
Yeah. I'm pretty excited about that. I think that it's going to be a good thing.
Absolutely. And just in terms of the number of hours it's going to save you from having to do that research and stop midway through a financial plan to go do some tech support for one of your employees' computers.
The other thing too is, prospects were asking about file security and privacy policies, and to be able to look them in the eye and say, we have, this company called that is watching this for us and making sure we're up to date on all of our technology. That's been meaningful with a couple high net worth prospects already. So, sometimes you can't, I'd like to be able to say, yes, it will save us X dollars at so many dollars an hour. And this is what that'll equate to. But I think there's a lot more to it than that.
Definitely.
So.
And maybe some of our solopreneurs may not consider this to be a valuable expense where they are in their firm development. But when it comes to a firm like yours, where you have multiple offices with multiple staff, these are the issues that the advisors start facing. So great feedback on all of that. If you can believe it, David, we're rounding out our hour right now, so which means I'm going to ask you our final question of whether you would have changed anything over the past 20 years. Now that you are where you are, is there anything that you regret or wish you had changed that you would have if you had the opportunity to?
I think I was reluctant and afraid to make some leaps earlier in my career that would have worked out just fine if I hadn't been so chicken. And, but the end result is a lot of those situations provided the experience that I've got now and kind of contribute to the voice that I have with clients. And I think that's valuable. So I don't know that there's a lot of second guessing to do there. There's an old country song by Tom T. Hall with a line that is, I don't have no reason to live my life over. I just find different ways to make the same mistakes again. And so, there's something to that. And I think if I could go back and tell my, 20-year prior self something, I would have liked to have been able to see Beth's retirement party when I was new in the business. And that would have been something to show like any young person trying to start out in this industry, what it was like to, have been doing it for 20 some years and have all these people show up. It was pretty cool.
Yeah, you get to really see who you've impacted and the lives that you helped change.
Right.
So neat, David. Well, thank you so much for your time. It's been a totally enjoyable hour. I'm sure we could talk for hours after this too, but we'll let the listeners get on with their day. David, thank you so much.
Thanks, Maddie.
All right.
XY Planning Network's annual benchmarking survey is out. Are you curious about the average number of clients XYPN members get in their first year, or how successful niches really are? To answer these burning questions and more, we've again enlisted a professional research firm to complete our annual benchmarking study. Get your copy hot off the press and discover vital statistics such as the median advisor revenue by years in practice and sources of firm growth, from referrals to blogging, social media, and more. Head over to xyplanningnetwork.com/study to purchase your copy today.
Be sure to join our VIP community at xyplanningnetwork.com/VIP to hang out with other XYPN radio listeners, ask questions for future mailbag episodes with Alan and Kitsis, and finally, to find a community of like-minded financial advisors. Thanks so much for joining me today. We'll see you next time.
You're not alone, and you're not crazy. It's scary starting, building, and growing your own financial planning firm. And that's why we put together a free private community just for you, the Cutting Edge Financial Planner. Go to xyplanningnetwork.com/VIP or text XYPN Radio to 33344 and join a network of thousands ready to change the lives of Gen X and Gen Y clients.